My mom took out a loan of $250,000 in my name and spent it on my golden brother's education, saying that I am obligated to do this for the family. Hi Reddit, I'm Alex. I never thought I'd be writing here, but I don't know what else to do. A week ago, my life was turned completely upside down. I'm 25, recently graduated, and working my first full-time job. I thought I had a pretty good handle on life until last Tuesday when I got an email from my bank that made my heart stop. It wasn't spam or a phishing attempt. It was real. My online banking account showed I was $250,000 in debt. My education cost around $120,000, and even though I had a partial scholarship, the numbers never came close to this. I froze, staring at the screen, thinking it had to be a mistake. I reread the email 3 times, then immediately logged into my bank account to see the same horrifying numbers staring back at me. At first, I thought someone must have hacked into my account. I called the bank and, after being transferred a few times, I finally spoke to someone who seemed to have answers. They told me the debt wasn't an error. It was tied to a series of loans under my name. I was stunned. The rep rattled off numbers and details I didn't recognize. Multiple loans opened in the last 3 years, all legitimate in their records. Wait, I interrupted, trying to stay calm. The only loans I've taken out are for college. Where did these others come from? The rep's tone stayed maddeningly professional. These loans appear to be signed by you, sir. We can send you copies of the documents. Documents? My mind raced. Someone had forged my signature. It had to be. I barely remember how I finished the call, but they agreed to send over the paperwork. When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the wall. My first instinct was to call my mom. My family isn't wealthy. My mom works 2 jobs, and my dad left when I was 12. I grew up knowing how to stretch a dollar, so I couldn't imagine my mom having anything to do with this mess. Still, I needed someone to talk to. When I called her, I tried to keep my voice steady. Mom, something's wrong. The bank says I owe $250,000. They claim I took out loans I've never heard of. There was a pause. That has to be a mistake. Honey, did you call them? Did they say how this happened? I explained everything. She sounded as shocked as I felt, but something about her tone made me pause. There was a hesitation, just for a split second, before she said, "We'll figure it out. Maybe there's been some mix-up." After hanging up, I still felt uneasy. Why had she hesitated? I shook it off, deciding she was probably just as overwhelmed as I was. The documents arrived 2 days later. I opened the email, dreading what I'd find. Scanned copies of contracts with my name and signature appeared on my screen. I studied them closely. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. At least, I didn't think it was. Could someone really copy my handwriting that well? The listed contact information was what really threw me off. The address wasn't mine, but it was familiar. It was my mom's address. My stomach dropped. My mom had been helping me with some of my paperwork when I first applied for college loans. Could she have? No, that was impossible. She wouldn't. But the nagging thought wouldn't leave me. I called the bank again, hoping to dig deeper. I asked for any additional details, like phone numbers or email addresses tied to the loans. They hesitated at first, citing privacy concerns, but I pushed, desperate. Finally, they relented and emailed me a list of contacts. My worst fears were confirmed. 2 of the phone numbers were ones I recognized. My mom's cell and her work number. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could this be happening? I immediately called her. Mom, I started, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. The bank sent me more information. Your phone number is listed on these loans. There was silence on the other end. Then she sighed. A long, heavy sigh. Alex, I was going to tell you, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I could barely process what she was saying. What? Tell me what? Mom, did you take out loans in my name? I didn't have a choice, she said quickly, her voice shaking. After your father left, things were tight. I thought I could pay them off before you found out. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was speechless. My own mother had done this to me? Mom, you took out $250,000, I said, my voice rising. How could you think I wouldn't find out? She started crying, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I hung up and just sat there, my hands shaking. My own mother had betrayed me. The fallout from that phone call was brutal. I couldn't focus at work. I avoided my mom's calls and texts. The few times I answered, she begged me to understand. She claimed she used the money to pay off debts, medical bills, and keep the house. But I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. I spent hours online, researching what to do. Could I sue her? Would that even help? Would I go to jail if I couldn't pay back the loans? Every scenario felt like a dead end. I even called a lawyer, but his advice wasn't comforting. You could file a police report, he said, but that would mean pressing charges against your mother. The thought of doing that made me sick, but what other choice did I have? My credit was ruined. My future was ruined. And she was acting like an apology would magically fix everything. I haven't decided what to do yet. Part of me wants to cut her out of my life completely. Another part of me wonders if I'll ever recover from this, financially or emotionally. How do you move forward when the person you trusted most is the one who betrayed you? I tried to stay strong after finding out my mom had forged my name on those loans. I thought nothing could shake me further, but I was wrong. The truth went so much deeper than I'd imagined. A few days after that devastating phone call with my mom, she convinced me to meet at her house. She said we needed to talk things out in person, and she had something to tell me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, my dad, Mark, was there too. I hadn't seen him in years. He and my mom divorced when I was a teenager, and he'd been mostly absent ever since. Seeing him there immediately put me on edge. What's he doing here? I asked, glaring at my mom. We thought it would be better if we talked about this together, she said nervously, wringing her hands. I didn't sit down. I stayed by the door, arms crossed. Fine. Start talking. My dad spoke first, which surprised me. Alex, before we get into this, I want you to know we didn't do this to hurt you. My patience snapped. Didn't do what, exactly? Screw up my entire life? Rack up $250,000 in debt under my name? You didn't think that would hurt me? My mom started crying, but I didn't care. She'd been crying every time we talked, and it wasn't fixing anything. My dad put his hands up in a defensive gesture. Just hear us out, he said. This isn't as black and white as you think. Oh, really? I shot back. Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, you two are criminals. My dad took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. Yes, we took out loans in your name. But it wasn't just for your education. That caught me off guard. What do you mean? My education cost $120,000. Where's the rest of the money? My mom, still sniffling, finally spoke up. It went to help your brother. Kevin? I asked, confused. Kevin didn't even go to college. What could he possibly need $120,000 for? My dad rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated. Your brother wanted to pursue modeling. He said he had potential, but he needed money to build his portfolio, travel, and network. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you kidding me? You took out loans in my name so Kevin could, what? Take selfies on a beach and call it a career? It wasn't like that. My mom insisted. He really thought he could make it, and we wanted to support him. I laughed bitterly. Support him? At my expense? Did it ever occur to you to ask me before you mortgaged my future? Neither of them had an answer for that. My dad looked away, and my mom just kept wiping her tears. The silence stretched until I couldn't take it anymore. What exactly did he spend the money on? I demanded. Because he sure as hell isn't on the cover of GQ. My mom hesitated before answering. He traveled a lot. To LA, New York, Miami. He said it was for networking. And the rest? I pressed. Some of it went to a photographer. And he bought some wardrobe pieces. I stared at her, incredulous. You mean clothes? He spent $120,000 on vacations and clothes. It wasn't just that, she said quickly. He needed to make connections. You have to understand, Alex. He really thought he was on the verge of something big. Let me guess, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He also needed to party with these connections, right? Neither of them answered, which told me everything I needed to know. I felt like I was going to explode. Do you realize what you've done? My credit is ruined. I can't buy a car, a house, anything. And for what? So Kevin could play pretend? Alex, my dad said, his tone firm. We're going to help you fix this. Oh, really? How? Are you planning to magically conjure up $250,000? We'll figure it out, my mom said weakly. We didn't mean for it to get this bad. Stop saying that. I shouted. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't care. My mom burst into fresh tears, and my dad finally snapped. That's enough. We made mistakes, okay? But we're still your parents. You don't get to talk to us like that. I laughed bitterly. I don't get to talk to you like this? After you ruined my life? You've got some nerve. My mom tried to intervene. Please, Alex, let's not fight. We're a family. No, I said coldly. We're not. A family doesn't betray each other like this. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. My mom chased after me, pleading, Please, Alex, don't go. We can work this out. I turned to face her, my voice ice cold. The only way you can fix this is by paying back every penny. Until then, don't call me. Over the next few days, the truth about Kevin came trickling out. My cousin, Emma, filled me in on some of the details my parents conveniently left out. She told me Kevin had been partying nonstop for years, flaunting the success he supposedly had in the modeling world. He'd posted pictures on Instagram from expensive resorts, fancy restaurants, and private boats. Meanwhile, I'd been busting my ass to pay for textbooks and ramen noodles. The more I learned, the angrier I got. It wasn't just the money. It was the sheer disrespect. My parents had lied to me, used me, and all for a brother who clearly didn't care about anyone but himself. I blocked Kevin on social media because I couldn't stand seeing his smug face anymore. My mom kept calling, leaving voicemails begging me to forgive her. My dad sent a few texts, all variations of the same theme. We're sorry. We'll fix this. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. How could I trust them after this? One night, Kevin himself called. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. Hey bro, it's Kevin. Look, I heard you're upset, and I get it. But you need to chill. Mom and Dad did what they had to do. You wouldn't even have been able to go to college without them taking out loans, so maybe cut them some slack? Anyway, hit me up when you're ready to talk. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Chill? Cut them some slack? He acted like I owed him something, like he was the victim. I deleted the voicemail and blocked his number too. Hey Reddit, it's me again. If you've been keeping up, you know the mess I've been dragged into. $250,000 in debt thanks to my parents, Diane and Mark, who took out loans in my name without my knowledge. They used a good chunk of it, $120,000, to fund my brother Kevin's so-called modeling career, which turned out to be nothing more than him partying and taking vacations while pretending to network. I've spent weeks trying to process it, but now it's come to a head. I decided it was time to confront my family directly, and, honestly, it was even worse than I imagined. My mom asked me to come over for dinner to talk things through. I was hesitant but decided to go, mostly because I had something important to say. I couldn't keep carrying the burden of their decisions. I arrived at their house in the evening, and the atmosphere was already tense. My dad was sitting in the living room, arms crossed, while my mom hovered nervously by the kitchen. Kevin wasn't there, but I figured he'd show up eventually. He always managed to weasel his way into these situations. We sat down in the dining room, and my mom tried to make small talk about the weather and work. I cut her off. We're not here to catch up, Mom. Let's get to the point. I'm not paying Kevin's debt. The words hung in the air like a grenade. My mom looked at me, her expression a mix of shock and hurt, while my dad narrowed his eyes. You can't mean that, my mom said finally, her voice shaky. We're a family. Families stick together. I didn't flinch. Families don't do what you did. You lied to me, stole from me, and now you expect me to clean up the mess you made? No. My dad leaned forward, his voice sharp. You're being unreasonable. You went to college because of those loans. Without them, you wouldn't even have the education you have now. And I'm willing to deal with the part that went to my education. I shot back. But the money you gave Kevin? That's not my responsibility. I didn't agree to it and I won't pay for it. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Alex, We didn't mean for this to happen. Kevin needed help. He had big dreams, and we wanted to support him. Big dreams? I laughed bitterly. He didn't even try to make it work. He took your money and spent it on vacations, clothes, and God knows what else. And now you want me to pay for his mistakes. It wasn't like that, my mom said, wiping her tears. He was networking, building his career. It's not easy to break into the modeling industry. Networking? I repeated, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? Kevin isn't a model. He's a freeloader, and you two enabled him. My dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. That's enough. Kevin is your brother, and you have a responsibility to help him. A responsibility? I said, my voice shaking with anger. What about your responsibility as parents? You're supposed to protect me, not destroy my future. My mom started crying harder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to speak. Alex, please, we're trying to fix this. We didn't mean for it to go this far. I felt my anger boiling over. Stop saying that. You knew exactly what you were doing when you signed those papers. You just didn't care what it would cost me. Before my mom could respond, the front door opened, and Kevin walked in. He looked completely unbothered, dressed in designer sneakers and a jacket that probably cost more than my rent. He grabbed a soda from the fridge, completely ignoring the tension in the room. What's going on? He asked casually, popping the can open. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious right now? Kevin shrugged. Mom said you were upset about the loans or whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You spent $120,000 of my money on vacations and parties, and you think it's not a big deal? He rolled his eyes. It wasn't your money. It was Mom and Dad's decision. Yeah, and they stole it from me. I snapped. You don't get to act like this doesn't affect me. Do you even realize what $250,000 in debt means? I'll never be able to buy a house, a car, anything. Kevin smirked. Maybe if you stopped whining and worked harder, you wouldn't be so stressed. I lost it. Are you kidding me? You have no idea what hard work even looks like. You've spent your whole life leeching off Mom and Dad, and now you've dragged me down with you. Stop it. My mom cried, standing between us. This isn't helping anyone. Kevin crossed his arms, looking bored. Whatever. This is such a waste of time. I turned to my parents. See? This is who you're defending. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. My dad glared at me. Kevin is family. You don't turn your back on family. Family, I said, my voice breaking. You call this family? A real family doesn't betray each other. A real family doesn't destroy each other's lives. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. My mom ran after me, grabbing my arm. Alex, please, don't leave. We can work this out. I shook her off. There's nothing to work out. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. But I'm not paying for Kevin's mistakes. As I walked out, I could hear my dad shouting after me, calling me selfish and ungrateful. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Hey Reddit, it's me again. After everything I've been through, I thought I had reached the peak of betrayal with my parents. Turns out, I was wrong. Over the past few weeks, I've been uncovering more about the loans and the lies they've told, and it's worse than I could have imagined. I've started investigating the documents more thoroughly, and the truth I've found has left me no choice but to consider legal action. After cutting ties with my parents, I started diving deeper into the paperwork the bank had sent me. I wanted to understand every detail, hoping to find something that might help me get out of this mess. I cleared my weekend, sat at my desk, and began sorting through the massive stack of documents. The more I read, the clearer it became that my parents had planned this for years. One of the first things I noticed was the dates. Several of the loans were taken out right after I turned 18. That didn't sit right with me because, at the time, I had no idea how loans even worked. I was still figuring out how to open a checking account, let alone sign contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars. That's when I remembered something vivid and chilling in hindsight. It was a day during the summer before I started college. My mom told me we needed to stop by the bank to handle some last-minute paperwork for my student loans. I remember sitting in the bank's office, nervous and out of my depth, while my mom breezed through the forms like it was nothing. She handed me a pen and told me to sign several documents, reassuring me it was all standard procedure. "Don't worry about it, Alex," she had said with a smile. "This is just part of going to college." At the time, I trusted her completely. She was my mom, after all. Why would I doubt her? But now, looking back, I realized she never explained what those papers were. She didn't even let me read them. She just smiled, rushed me through, and told me to sign. I decided to dig deeper. I requested my bank statements from the past several years, including all transactions linked to the loans. What I found made my stomach turn. My parents had been using my bank account for years, treating it like their personal slush fund. There were payments to luxury stores, five-star hotels, and even a shady talent agency in Los Angeles. One charge stood out: $15,000 for what was labeled as career development services. I Googled the name of the company and immediately realized it was one of those scam agencies that prey on naive people trying to break into Hollywood. They promise fame and success in exchange for absurd upfront fees. My brother Kevin had fallen for it, and my parents had funded it, with money stolen in my name. At this point, I knew I needed professional help. I contacted a lawyer, Rachel Martinez, who specializes in financial fraud and identity theft. During our first meeting, I laid everything out: every loan, every forged signature, every lie my parents had told me. Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. "This is a textbook case of financial fraud," she said. "The fact that they involved you when you were 18 complicates things slightly because, legally, you were an adult. But the way they misled you and used your name without consent is still illegal." She advised me to gather as much evidence as possible: bank statements, loan agreements, and any communication with my parents that could prove their intent. She also encouraged me to file a police report, even if I wasn't ready to press charges yet, to create a formal record of the situation. I spent the next week collecting evidence. I went through my email history and found messages from the bank dating back to when the loans were first taken out. Some of them included details that I'd never seen before: interest rates, repayment schedules, and terms I couldn't have agreed to because I didn't even know they existed. I also found texts from my mom around the same time, urging me to trust her and not stress about the details. When I showed Rachel everything, she was stunned. "This isn't just negligence," she said. "This was calculated. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they took advantage of your trust." Hearing her say that out loud hit me harder than I expected. Deep down, I think I'd been holding on to some hope that my parents' actions were just careless mistakes. But Rachel's words shattered that illusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal, plain and simple. With Rachel's help, I drafted a plan. Before taking any legal action, she suggested giving my parents one final chance to make things right. We wrote a formal letter outlining everything I had discovered, along with a demand. They needed to repay the portion of the loans that didn't go toward my education, or I would file a lawsuit. I decided to deliver the letter in person. I wanted to see their reaction. When I arrived at their house, my mom greeted me with her usual nervous energy, while my dad stood in the background, arms crossed. I handed them the letter and watched as they read it. My mom's face turned pale, and my dad's expression hardened. "Are you serious?" my dad asked, his voice low and angry. "You'd really sue your own parents?" "I don't want to," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But you've left me no choice. You've ruined my credit, put me in unimaginable debt, and lied to me for years. If you don't pay back the money, I'll take legal action." My mom started crying, as usual. "Alex, we didn't mean for it to get this far. We were just trying to help you and Kevin. We thought we could pay it back before you found out." "That excuse doesn't work anymore," I said. "You've been saying the same thing over and over, but nothing changes. This is your last chance. Pay back the money, or I'll see you in court." My dad leaned forward, glaring at me. "You're turning your back on your family." "No," I said firmly. "You turned your back on me the moment you forged my name and stole my future." Hi Reddit, it's me again. I thought I'd hit rock bottom after discovering the extent of my parents' betrayal and beginning the process of holding them accountable. But nothing could have prepared me for my brother Kevin's reaction. I already knew Kevin was spoiled, selfish, and largely oblivious, but his complete indifference to the chaos he's caused has left me feeling more betrayed than ever. If there was any shred of trust left between me and my family, Kevin just destroyed it. I hadn't spoken to Kevin since I confronted my parents about the loans. I'd blocked him on social media after seeing post after post of him living it up. Expensive restaurants, private parties, and luxurious vacations, all while I was drowning in debt he'd helped create. A part of me hoped he'd at least feel guilty when he found out how badly his actions had hurt me. Maybe he'd apologize or offer to help in some way. Turns out, I was giving him way too much credit. A week after I delivered the ultimatum to my parents, Kevin texted me out of the blue. "Hey bro, heard you're pissed? Wanna talk?" I stared at the message, my blood boiling. He made it sound like this was some minor misunderstanding, like I was overreacting to a little spat. I didn't want to engage, but Rachel, my lawyer, had encouraged me to get everything in writing. So I replied, "Sure, let's talk." We met at a coffee shop downtown. Kevin showed up 20 minutes late, wearing designer sunglasses and a jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He sauntered in like he didn't have a care in the world, flashing me a casual grin as he sat down. "What's up?" he asked, like this was a friendly catch-up between brothers. I couldn't hold back. "What's up? Are you serious, Kevin? You've racked up $120,000 in debt under my name, and you think this is just another day?" He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "It's not like I stole the money, Alex. Mom and Dad handled all that. That doesn't make it okay." I snapped. "They did it for you. You spent all that money on your so-called modeling career, and now I'm the one stuck paying for it." Kevin rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. It's not like they made you sign up for the loans. You're acting like this is all my fault." I leaned forward, barely able to contain my anger. "You don't think you're responsible? You took the money. You blew it on parties, clothes, and scams. You don't think that makes you part of the problem?" He scoffed. "I didn't force them to take out the loans, Alex. They made their own decisions. I was just doing my thing." "Your thing?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Your thing is bankrupting this family and destroying my future? Is that what you're proud of?" Kevin crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Look, I didn't ask for this drama. You've always been the golden boy, going to college, getting the real job. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me for once. Sorry if that offends you." I stared at him, stunned. "Are you actually trying to make this about you? You think you're the victim here?" Kevin shrugged again. "I'm just saying it's not my fault." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Any lingering hope I'd had that Kevin might take responsibility was completely shattered. It was like talking to a brick wall, a smug, entitled brick wall that couldn't care less about the damage he'd caused. I decided to try one last time. "Do you even understand what this has done to me? My credit is destroyed. I can't get a car loan, a mortgage, anything. I'm drowning in debt because of you. Don't you feel even a little guilty?" Kevin didn't miss a beat. "Why should I? You're making a big deal out of nothing. People have debt all the time. You'll figure it out." His words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're unbelievable. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd care enough to help fix this. But you don't care about anyone but yourself." Kevin rolled his eyes again, leaning back in his chair. "Whatever, Alex. If you're going to throw a tantrum, that's on you." I left without another word. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. When I got home, I replayed the conversation in my head, growing angrier with every passing minute. How could he be so indifferent? This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about family. Kevin's refusal to acknowledge his role in this mess felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I vented to Rachel the next day, telling her everything Kevin had said. She listened patiently, then leaned forward with a determined look on her face. "Alex, you need to stop expecting him to take responsibility. He's shown you who he is. Focus on protecting yourself and holding your parents accountable. Kevin's a lost cause." She was right, of course, but it didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. In the following days, I tried to focus on the legal case, but Kevin's indifference kept gnawing at me. I started hearing from mutual acquaintances who had seen his recent Instagram posts, pictures of him at a luxury resort, sipping cocktails by the pool. The captions were dripping with his usual arrogance. living my best life and hustle pays off. I couldn't take it anymore. I unblocked him just long enough to see for myself. Sure enough, there he was, flaunting his lifestyle like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. While I was losing sleep over how to repair my finances, Kevin was living in a fantasy world, completely detached from reality. I sent him one final message. Kevin, you're a disgrace. I don't know how you sleep at night knowing what you've done to me. Don't bother contacting me again. Then I blocked him for good. Since then, I've been trying to move forward, but it's hard. Kevin's indifference has made me question everything about my family. If my own brother can shrug off this kind of betrayal, what does that say about the people I grew up with? How do you rebuild trust when the people closest to you have proven they don't care about you at all? Hi Reddit, it's Alex again. I never thought things could get worse after everything my parents did, but here I am, filing a lawsuit against them. Despite my warnings and giving them ample time to make things right, they've done nothing but delay and make excuses. I'm out of patience and now, the only option left is legal action. This choice has fractured my family in ways I never thought possible. I met with Rachel, my lawyer, to discuss the next steps. When I told her my parents hadn't followed through on their promises, she nodded knowingly. It's typical in cases like this. They think you'll get tired of fighting and just let it go. That's not going to happen, I said. I'm done waiting for them to do the right thing. Rachel explained the process of filing a lawsuit. It felt surreal as I signed the paperwork, officially taking legal action against my own parents. The case was clear: fraud, identity theft, and emotional damages. I had everything I needed: proof of forged signatures, transaction records showing how the money was spent, and text messages where they admitted to using my name without consent. But even with all of that, it felt like a punch to the gut. These were the people who were supposed to protect me, and now I was dragging them to court. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Within days, I started getting calls and texts from relatives. Most of them weren't supportive. My Aunt Susan was one of the first to reach out. Her voice on the phone was sharp and disapproving. "You're suing your parents?" she asked. "What are you thinking, Alex? This is family business. You don't take it to court." "They stole from me," I said, my frustration rising. "They lied, they ruined my credit, and now they're refusing to fix it. What else am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to find a way to work it out without involving strangers," she shot back. "Suing your own parents? Do you have any idea how that makes you look?" I clenched my jaw. I don't care how it makes me look. I care about getting my life back. Not everyone in the family was against me, though. My cousin Emma, who had always been supportive, called to tell me I was doing the right thing. "They've backed you into a corner," she said. "You gave them every chance to fix this, and they refused. You have to look out for yourself." Her encouragement meant a lot, especially since it felt like most of the family was turning against me. My grandmother, who usually stayed out of family conflicts, called me one evening with a soft, pleading tone. "Alex, sweetheart, is there no other way?" she asked. "This lawsuit is tearing the family apart." I sighed, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Grandma, I tried to handle this without going to court. I gave them months to pay back the money, and they did nothing. What else can I do? I just hate to see this happen," she said. "It's so painful for everyone." "It's painful for me too," I said. "But they made their choices. Now they have to deal with the consequences." As the lawsuit progressed, the tension in the family grew worse. Some relatives supported me, understanding the gravity of what my parents had done. Others, like Susan, accused me of being selfish and vindictive. My parents, meanwhile, tried to paint themselves as the victims. My mom cried to anyone who would listen, saying I was turning my back on the people who raised me, while my dad accused me of being greedy and ungrateful. The breaking point came when I ran into Kevin at a coffee shop. He strolled in like he didn't have a care in the world, wearing his usual designer clothes and acting like nothing was wrong. He saw me sitting at a table and walked over, grinning. "Hey, Alex," he said casually. "I heard about the lawsuit." "Really? You're suing Mom and Dad?" I glared at him, my anger flaring. "What do you want, Kevin?" "I just think it's a little much," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I mean, yeah, they screwed up, but suing them? Isn't that kind of extreme?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Extreme? Kevin, they stole $250,000 from me. Most of it went to fund your ridiculous modeling career, and now they're refusing to take responsibility. What do you expect me to do? Kevin shrugged, leaning back in his chair. I don't know. Work it out like a normal family? This whole court thing is overkill. You have no idea what you're talking about, I snapped. Do you even realize what they've done to me? My credit is destroyed. I'll be paying off this debt for the rest of my life. And you're sitting here, acting like it's no big deal. He rolled his eyes. Look, it sucks, but it's not like it's my fault. Mom and Dad made the decisions. Take it up with them. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You benefited from all of this. You lived it up while I was left in the dark, and now you're pretending you have no responsibility? Kevin shrugged again, completely unfazed. I didn't ask for any of this drama. You're the one making it a big deal. I stood up, unable to listen to him any longer. You're just as bad as they are, I said. Don't ever talk to me again. The lawsuit finally went to court after months of delays. My parents tried every tactic to stall, claiming they needed more time to gather evidence and begging for mediation. Rachel warned me this would happen. They're hoping to wear you down, she said. But don't let them. We have a strong case. The day in court was one of the most emotionally exhausting experiences of my life. Seeing my parents sitting at the defense table, avoiding my gaze, made my stomach churn. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years, while my dad sat stiffly, his expression cold and unyielding. Rachel presented the evidence with precision and clarity. Forged signatures, transaction records, and text messages where my parents admitted to their actions. My mom tried to play the sympathy card, breaking down in tears and saying they only wanted to help their children. The judge, however, wasn't swayed. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. My parents were ordered to repay the money and cover my legal fees. It was a hollow victory. On paper, I'd won, but the emotional toll was overwhelming. I knew my relationship with my parents, and much of my family, would never recover. After the ruling, I received a barrage of messages from relatives. Some congratulated me, saying justice had been served. Others, like Aunt Susan, called me a traitor and said I destroyed the family. Kevin, unsurprisingly, stayed silent. I haven't heard from him since our last encounter, and I don't expect to. I'm trying to move forward now, focusing on rebuilding my life. With Rachel's help, I've started repairing my credit and figuring out a plan to move past this nightmare. It's going to take time, but for the first time in months, I feel like I'm taking back control. To anyone reading this, I'll say this. Family is supposed to be about trust and support. When that trust is broken, sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect yourself. I never wanted it to come to this, but I don't regret standing up for myself. If you're facing something similar, know that you're not alone, and that it's okay to fight for your future. Hi Reddit, it's Alex again. After months of chaos, legal battles, and shattered trust, I've finally reached a resolution. But it's not the victory I thought it would be. My parents, after all the delays and excuses, agreed to pay off the debt and cover the court costs. You'd think I'd feel relief, maybe even triumph, but what I feel is far more complicated. The cost of this resolution wasn't just financial. It destroyed what little was left of my relationship with them. I was gearing up for the trial. Rachel had prepared me for everything, what to expect, how to handle cross-examination, and the likely outcomes. We were confident in the case, given the overwhelming evidence, but the thought of standing in court and airing my family's dirty laundry in front of strangers made my stomach churn. Then, 2 days before the trial, Rachel called me. Alex, your parents' lawyer just reached out. They're offering to settle. I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. Settle? What does that mean? They've agreed to pay back the $120,000 spent on Kevin's expenses, plus the court costs, she explained. In exchange, you'll drop the lawsuit. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? The money would be repaid, and I wouldn't have to endure the stress of a trial. But the timing felt suspect. Why now? I asked. Why not months ago when I first gave them the chance? Rachel hesitated before answering. Probably because they know they'll lose in court. Settling saves them the public embarrassment of a trial, I agreed to the settlement, but not without a heavy heart. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about cutting my losses and moving on. Rachel handled the paperwork, and the agreement was finalized within days. The money was transferred to my account, and for the first time in months, I was debt-free. I wish I could say that resolving the financial aspect fixed everything, but it didn't. The settlement came with a devastating realization. My relationship with my parents was beyond repair. They hadn't agreed to settle out of remorse or a desire to make things right. They'd done it to protect themselves. The lies, the manipulation, and their refusal to take responsibility until they were forced to had shattered any trust one had left. My mom called me the day after the settlement was finalized. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Alex," she said, her voice trembling. "I hope now that this is over, we can move forward as a family." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "Move forward? Mom, you only agreed to settle because you didn't want to lose in court. This isn't some magical reset button." "That's not fair," she said, her voice breaking. "We've done everything we can to make this right. Can't you forgive us?" "Forgive you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You spent months denying what you did, blaming me, and trying to guilt me into dropping the case. And now you want forgiveness because you finally paid back what you stole? It doesn't work that way." My mom started crying, but I felt nothing. I'd spent so long being angry, hurt, and betrayed that I didn't have any emotion left to give her. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My dad didn't bother reaching out, which didn't surprise me. He'd been hostile and defensive throughout the entire ordeal. Kevin, true to form, stayed silent as well. I hadn't heard from him since our last encounter, and I had no desire to reach out. Other family members chimed in, though. Aunt Susan called to tell me how disappointed she was in me for taking things this far. "You've ruined the family, Alex," she said. "I hope you're happy." "I didn't ruin anything," I told her. "Mom and Dad did that when they lied and stole from me. Don't put this on me." Not everyone was against me, thankfully. Emma, my cousin, stayed in my corner, checking in regularly to make sure I was okay. "I know this isn't how you wanted it to end," she said, "but at least you're free now. You can start over." She was right. The debt was gone, but the cost was steep. My parents, my brother, and many of my relatives were effectively out of my life. It felt like a hollow victory, like I'd won the battle but lost the war. Once the dust settled, I found myself at a crossroads. For months, my life had revolved around the lawsuit. Now that it was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. The anger and betrayal that had fueled me were still there, but they didn't have the same intensity. What replaced them was a deep sense of loss. I'd always been close to my family, or so I thought. Holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners, it all felt so normal back then. Now, looking back, I realized how much of it was a facade. The people I thought I could trust most had used and betrayed me. It was a hard pill to swallow. I decided it was time to focus on myself. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra projects and setting new career goals. My boss, Jenna, noticed the shift and called me into her office one afternoon. "You've been killing it lately," she said with a smile. "I know things have been rough for you, but I can see how hard you're working to move forward." "Thanks," I said, feeling a rare flicker of pride. "It's been a tough year, but I'm trying." She nodded. "Well, keep it up. I think you have a bright future here." Her words meant more than she probably realized. For the first time in months, I felt like I was building something positive. Outside of work, I started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout of everything that had happened. My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, helped me unpack the betrayal and figure out how to move forward. "It's okay to grieve the loss of your family," she said during one session. "Even though they're still alive, the relationship you had with them is gone. Allow yourself to mourn that." I followed her advice, giving myself permission to feel the sadness I'd been trying to suppress. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I moved to a new apartment, one that felt like a fresh start. I reconnected with old friends I drifted away from during the chaos of the lawsuit. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One evening, Emma came over for dinner. As we sat on the couch, laughing over a silly TV show. She turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You've been through hell, Alex," she said. "But look at you now. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for."